Science has a funny characteristic. It's almost always contrasted with religion. Yet, the more people adopt a scientific approach, the more science itself begins to resemble a religion, one that demands belief and discourages questioning. Take Einstein, for example. When he proposed his theory of relativity, he was mocked by the scientific community of his time. Later on, Einstein himself ridiculed Niels Bohr, the father of quantum mechanics. And when it comes to the theory of evolution, the statistics are even more surprising. In 2009, the Pew Research Center conducted a survey of scientists in the U.S., revealing that 51% of them believe in some form of higher power. Interestingly, a significant number of believers were found in biology and genetics, ironically, some of the most precise fields of science. Why is that? Could it be that the theory of evolution has so many flaws that they can only be explained by divine intervention? Which popular criticisms of Darwin's theory are mere myths, and which ones hold real merit? Make yourself comfortable and we'll dive into it all, starting with perhaps the most common criticism, the mathematical one. The theory that evolution created us from single-celled organisms through mutations, trial, and error is often criticized for its mathematical challenges and the seemingly impossibly low odds of life and humanity coming into existence. A classic example used to illustrate this criticism is a chessboard. Imagine all 64 squares are uncolored, and someone has to paint them so that a white square always borders a black one. Do you know the maximum number of steps required to achieve this using the standard trial and error method? Those who paid attention in math class will immediately tell you, 2 to the power of 64. That's 18.5 quintillion steps. A quintillion, for reference, is a number with 18 zeros. And that's just 64 squares on a chessboard. Armed with this example, critics of Darwin often compare it to the human brain, which contains 100 billion neurons. They ask how long evolution would need to arrange all those neurons in the right configuration. Clearly, the number of steps required is almost unimaginable. In this light, the 3.8 billion years during which life has existed on Earth seems like an instant. In that time frame, you'd be lucky to solve the problem for a few dozen chessboards, let alone something as complex as the brain. But here's the catch. This criticism has no connection to reality. Evolution, first of all, doesn't make the maximum possible number of mistakes. It operates more like a computer algorithm. Secondly, probability theory doesn't work quite the way critics claim. In probability, an event with almost zero likelihood can still occur with 100% certainty. Don't believe it? Let me explain. Imagine a tournament where 1,024 participants are paired up and each pair flips a coin. The 512 losers are eliminated, while the winners pair off again and flip coins. This process continues until one person remains, having won 10 consecutive coin flips. On paper, the probability of winning 10 flips in a row is 1 in 1,024. But in reality, given the tournament format, there will always be a winner with 10 consecutive wins. The probability of this happening in the tournament structure is 100%. So, when you see mathematical refutations of Darwin's theory of evolution, feel free to dismiss them. From a mathematical perspective, both the emergence of life and the eventual appearance of humans over 3.7 billion years are entirely plausible. However, there are real reasons to critique the theory of evolution, and they boil down to 3 main issues. First, a fundamental lack of understanding about the origin of DNA. Second, the overly complex structure of living cells, which is difficult to explain through mutations alone. Third, the incredibly small number of transitional species discovered by humanity. Of these 3 issues, only one leads some scientists to believe in God. To figure out which one it is, let's break them down one by one. Let's start with paleontology. Darwin's theory is often misunderstood as implying that at some point there were gorilla humans, dinosaur ducks, and cat dogs. If you know that some supposed transitional species do exist, Gigantopithecus, Pithecanthropus, Neanderthals. These seem to be the ape humans everyone is looking for. But upon closer examination, it turns out that Neanderthals weren't actually direct ancestors of modern humans. They were a parallel species of Homo that went extinct. And despite extensive searches, there are very few truly transitional fossils bridging the gap from dinosaurs to birds. On the other hand, we have creatures like the coelacanth, a fish believed to have gone extinct 65 million years ago, until 1938, when a living specimen was caught off the coast of South Africa. This raises a question for Darwin. Why does evolution seem to work inconsistently? In some cases, it leaves no trace of transitional species, while in others, it preserves ancient creatures almost unchanged. The answer is actually quite simple, and it's not a mystery at all. Every species that has ever lived or is alive today is a transitional species, including us. Don't believe it? Just ask your tailbone, appendix, or your dentist after they hand you the bill for removing your wisdom teeth. Humans will look different in 1,000 years, and evolution doesn't recognize the concept of a finished species. Every dinosaur fossil we've ever found is a transitional form between them and modern chickens. Just take a look at Anatototon, a duck-billed dinosaur whose beak is nearly identical to those of ducks today. And the fact that we've only found a limited number of dinosaur fossils? Well, that's an entirely different issue. The second major criticism of evolution is the mind-boggling complexity of a living cell. This is where many scientists start leaning toward religious explanations, because every single cell in our body functions like a fully automated factory, with its own energy source, workers, division systems, input-output mechanisms, and even a troubleshooting team that reacts to any malfunctions. On top of all that, a cell constantly balances on the edge of thermal death, yet somehow avoids overheating and destruction. At first glance, mutations should only harm such an incredibly intricate system. Remove just one worker from this cellular factory, and division ceases, protein balance is disrupted, and the cell could literally burn itself out. And then there's DNA. It's not infinite in capacity. If mutations, Darwin's supposed driving force of evolution, keep accumulating, wouldn't we eventually lose the original genetic data? It's similar to the paradox of Theseus' ship, where over time, every wooden plank is replaced. But in this case, mutations are changing the planks into different shapes. Eventually, wouldn't we end up with something entirely unrecognizable, like a doghouse instead of a ship? This issue even has an official name, the error catastrophe hypothesis. Many prominent scientists subscribe to this theory, and they all describe the same fundamental problem, that over time, the accumulation of errors in DNA should lead to the degradation of living species, not evolution. Opponents of the theory, in turn, turn to mathematics. As we have already established, probability theory, first of all, allows for the emergence of such a complex organism as a living cell. On the other hand, purely statistically, the majority of mutations are always neutral. And the ship of Theseus, from the perspective of evolutionary theory and mathematics, remains a ship. It just so happens that the word mutation triggers a negative reaction in people. In reality, we don't even notice the vast majority of mutations. Some, like lactose tolerance, actually turn out to be beneficial. After all, there was a time when no one on the planet could drink cow's milk. So, as you can see, 99 out of 100 criticisms of the theory of evolution at least have strong counterarguments. But there is one problem that drives scientists toward faith. And that problem is DNA. More specifically, the question of how something living and capable of reproduction could emerge from nothing. Here, scientists truly have no concrete answer. In the entire history of science, no laboratory has ever successfully created a living cell from nothing. The best argument available so far is the idea of a primordial soup and the well-known elements required for life's formation. However, the mystery isn't just the process itself. It's also the question of what kind of life first appeared. And this is where DNA takes center stage. Scientists might one day create something as complex as Optimus Prime from the primordial soup. But making it reproduce? That's a different story. Without the ability to replicate, it would simply die and its species would end right there. The key to cell division, and thus all life, is DNA. And DNA is far too complex to have simply boiled up in the primordial soup out of nowhere. Even RNA, its younger sibling with a simpler structure, is still too intricate for that. This is where the greatest mystery of life lies, one that neither the theory of evolution nor any biologist has yet been able to answer. How did completely inorganic molecules come together to form something organic? Something that could not only sustain itself, but also replicate using proteins and external energy. There are several candidates for the title of the first proto-DNA, but after centuries of research, none of them have moved beyond theoretical speculation. And when something remains purely theoretical for so long, science and religion tend to find themselves in an unusual alliance. It's not uncommon to meet a highly respected microbiologist who can explain the intricate workings of DNA, break down the inner mechanisms of a cell, and proudly boast about publications in scientific journals, only to then go to church and light a candle. Because at a certain level of knowledge, the idea of a higher being breathing life into inorganic molecules doesn't seem so far-fetched after all. This is also where some people bring up Newton's second law of thermodynamics. Simply put, it states that dirty coffee mugs can pile up on your desk indefinitely, but they'll never clean and organize themselves. Every system naturally moves toward disorder, and time cannot be reversed to transform chaos into order. Dead people don't come back to life, shattered glass doesn't reassemble itself, and inorganic molecules shouldn't be able to self-organize into organic ones that replicate, because this would decrease entropy rather than increase it. Luckily for evolution, there's an answer to this argument. The second law of thermodynamics applies only to closed systems, and Earth is not one. Here, we have a constant influx of energy from the sun, internal heat sources, and a vast number of variables at play. In fact, theoretical physicist Daniel Steyer did the math back in 2008 and confirmed that neither the emergence of life nor evolution violates Newton's laws. And most other problems with evolution? They're almost always explainable. Many of them have been exaggerated by creationists and gained undeserved popularity. In reality, only one question remains unsolved. For now,